Good morning and welcome to the Yorkshire Dales. So we've come to the beautiful Yorkshire Dales today with a very specific reason, and that is that the heather is in bloom. And when the heather is in bloom, you get these beautiful purples and oranges and pinks in the tiny flowers that exist on the heather. And that creates the perfect backdrop for today's subject, and that's the red grouse. So I am in open moorland, in heather moorland, and unfortunately, this area is a grouse shooting estate, which is a little bit off-putting because as I'm filming this today, I've no doubt in the background, you'll probably hear the sounds of gunfire. Now, obviously where I'm photographing today, there is no shooting because I wouldn't be allowed onto this aspect. And I actually think this area in particular is not used for grouse shooting because there is public rights of way going all the way through it. But over in the distance, I can see shooting placements where these people stand and they pay money to blast grouse out of the sky. It completely baffles me. And I hope that through the video today, if it doesn't baffle you, it will do when you see how beautiful these birds are up close and personal. Now, I've cheated a little bit because actually we arrived here last night and we arrived just as we were approaching golden hour. I didn't have time to get the vlogging camera out. I didn't have time to get the GoPro out even. I just dived out of the car with my camera and oh my word, was I treated. Was I treated. Just take a look at this. Now today, I'm going to try and repeat some of those photographs. I'm certainly not going to achieve the same kind of lighting, but what I've got today is beautiful overcast conditions, which gives me a really nice muted light. And that's going to allow me to be able to experiment with different settings and hopefully bring some different shots than I achieved last night. Now obviously I'm not dressed ready for it, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself ready so that I blend in a little bit more with my surroundings. So there we go. I've got my 3D ghillie jacket on, just breaks up the outline a little bit. I wore this last night and it allowed me to get so much closer to the grouse than it did when I wasn't wearing it. So I definitely think it's worthwhile. You'll notice that I wear one glove, not two. And the reason for that is the glove that's holding the camera is the one that's going to be reflecting the light. This hand is going to be set a little bit further back. And also I like the dexterity of my fingers and being able to feel my fingertips to be able to work the buttons on the Z9. So for me, that's really important. So I only ever wear one glove. Occasionally I'll wear a second, and I've actually cut the fingers off, the thumb and those two fingers, just so that it gives me that same dexterity. And the other piece of absolutely critical kit that I've got with me is my binoculars. So I've got my Surrey Sportic binoculars. I've shared these with you before. They are absolutely my favourite binoculars, and I take them with me everywhere I go now, and they just give me that opportunity to get a little bit looking into the distance and spot my subjects so that I can then work my way to get closer. So if you want to see if I get nice and close to these red grouse, come along for the journey and see what I see. So you probably see I'm not far from the road at all, and I just thought I'd give you a little bit of an insight of what I'm looking for. Now at this time of year, what you tend to find is you'll get a group of hens, probably between 4 and 6, and amongst that there will be one of the cock grouse. Now the hens are beautiful, absolutely beautiful in their own right, but the cock grouse, the male grouse, have got this absolutely stunning red eyebrow, and I think that is a really, my word, these gulls are shouting like crazy. I think that red eyebrow really sets off the bird, and it kind of gives you that focal point that draws you into the eye. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. The whole time I'm scanning ahead of me with my binoculars, and I'm looking predominantly for the male grouse to stick its head up, because they're the ones that are keeping watch. The hens will be low to the ground and they'll be feeding, but they're very flat to the ground, and they're almost perfectly camouflaged. So you might not see the hen, but you probably will see the male grouse. Now, once you've picked out a male grouse, what's really important then is you scan the ground between you and the male for the females, because as I've said, they blend in so beautifully. It's really easy to overlook one of the females, and then as you're moving forward, you'll spook her, flush her, she'll fly out of the ground. The minute she flies, the rest of them will fly as well. So it's really important that you take your time. I can't stress enough, patience and taking your time really does bring reward when it comes to photographing grouse. Really didn't expect to see that. We've got 3 red kites that are circling over the grouse moor. If I was in the Peak District, anywhere where it is grouse shooting, you very rarely see any raptors whatsoever. But I've got 3 beautiful red kites circling over the top of me at the moment, which is beautiful to see, absolutely wonderful, despite the fact that you can hear the shooting in the distance. Now I've found my first grouse. It's actually a female, and I can only just see a head peeping amongst the heather. Now, it is very rare for the females to be on their own. They're almost always in a group. So I'm going to have to pick my way towards this very carefully to ensure that I don't flush and spook any of the other grouse. Here we go. So this hen is in an absolutely beautiful spot. She is sat in amongst a big clump of heather that's blooming beautifully with the purples. Now, by lowering my position and getting that little bit lower to the ground, I'm actually shooting in a little gap of heather in front of me that's in orange. So we've got that lovely orange and purple tones, really nice pastel tones. And all I can see is her head and her eye. And it's making absolutely wonderful photographs. Let me know what you think. Well, I found what I was looking for, and that was the male as he popped his head up amongst the heather. Unfortunately, the minute I started to do a piece to camera, it's pushed them backwards into the heather, which is a shame. They've not flown off at this point, they've just pushed back, but I'm not going to pursue them because my presence is known to them and it's made them back off. What I'm going to do now is just move around to a different location where, whilst I've been photographing this male and his hens, I've just seen him pop up just over my shoulder. So I'm going to make my way that direction and see if we can get closer. But so far, at times, I've probably been about 4 meters away from them, which just seems ridiculous, doesn't it? But I've not purposely gone to 4 meters. What's happened is the heather is really dense. And so I've picked my way through to a little spot where there is no heather, sat myself down on the grass, been focused on the male grouse in front of me, and then in your periphery vision you see a little bit of movement, you look up and there's a female right at the side of you. And that's what I was saying, you know, you've got to be so mindful of what's between you and your subject, because in this heather there could be 6 or 7 female grouse hugging the ground, not moving, and you just won't see them. They disappear, they melt into their surroundings. They're absolutely wonderfully camouflaged. And the whole time we've got 2 gulls that are shouting like crazy above me. Now, one of the things that I have noticed here is there are lots and lots of rabbits. And I've seen the rabbits in lots of different locations. The patches of the heather where I've been sat are actually often rabbit warrens, and the area around it is obviously been burrowed into, and probably why there isn't the heather. But unfortunately, every rabbit I've seen so far has got myxomatosis, which affects their eyesight. So on some of the rabbits that I've seen, it looks like their eyes completely disappeared. They're all red and raw and it's all swollen. It's allowing me to get very, very close to them because obviously their eyesight is impeded, but their hearing is not. So any noise and they will move. They're still able to feed, they're still able to exist, but it does make them that little bit easier to be predated upon. And what I'm noticing around me is lots and lots of rabbit carcasses. So I've no doubt that those rabbits are being predated on, probably by buzzards. And it's just a shame really that it's such a horrible disease. And it really does affect them, and it must be a horrible existence once they've got it. Now, interestingly, I don't know whether it's because shoots predominantly take place in the morning. Last night I was able to be much closer to the grouse than I have been this morning. They seem almost hyper vigilant, which is hardly surprising, is it? The way in which grouse shooting takes place is you have your shooters that are in bunkers, so they're not moving around, they're set in bunkers, and then you get bashers, and the bashers go out and they basically bash the heather. And that flushes the grouse, and the aim is, if they're good at what they're doing, they're going to flush the grouse towards the shooters, and then they're just stood there in their bunkers blasting them out of the sky. They call it the glorious 12th, don't they? There's nothing glorious about it at all. And I believe, I might be wrong, and you know, somebody watching this video might stand to correct me, but I believe they don't even eat the grouse. Too much hassle to pick all the shot out of them, so quite often they just get slung in stink pits. An absolute travesty and a complete waste of life, all for a tradition. Don't understand it myself, never will understand it. I can't understand people's lust for going out and killing animals, just baffles my brain. So one of the things that I think is definitely worth noting here is that although heather looks really hardy, it's a relatively fragile plant. So the worst thing I could do was to go traipsing through the heather. So the method that I like to do, my approach to this, is to look for natural tracks, natural trails that exist through the heather. Now they may be footpaths, as I'm on at the moment. They may be animal tracks, because the animals will often, particularly if we've got badgers and foxes in this area, will use the same paths, and that will keep the vegetation low and allows you to move through. The beauty of that, as kind of an extra point, is that allows you to be quite silent. You can move through the landscape in a way that doesn't cause any disturbance, and you can get nice and close. And all the time I'm looking for that telltale head popping above the heather. When I see that, my aim is to crouch down nice and low. I've obviously got my ghillie suit on. I can pull my hood up so it obscures my outline completely. And then it is slowly catch a monkey. No monkeys though. And by that, what I mean is I get a little bit closer, I'll take some shots, and I'll put my camera down, and I'll just let the grouse get used to me being there. And then I'll pick my camera up and I'll move forward. And when I say move forward, if I move a metre, it's quite a big distance. And then I'll take some shots, because I've got closer, I'll put the camera down, and then I'll let the grouse get used to me. And I inch forward, and I do exactly the same when I'm photographing mountain hares, or if I'm photographing shorebirds. I just think by taking this approach, being mindful of the wind direction so that you're downwind from them, that your scent's not being carried towards them, it allows you to get incredibly close to some wonderful wildlife in a way that doesn't cause disturbance. The other aspect of that, which is absolutely critical and often overlooked, is the way you then withdraw from the area. Because the temptation sometimes is you've got your shot, you've worked really hard, you've got to it, and then I see people stand up and walk away. The minute you stand up, birds all flushed, you've caused disturbance. The way in which you go in should be mirrored on the way that you come out. Now, you probably won't have to be as slow because you're moving away and they'll be aware of that, but you certainly just shouldn't stand up and walk away. So settings wise, when you're photographing the grouse, one of the things that I'm trying to achieve is to ensure that you get the beauty of this blossoming heather. So to do that, I can do that in two different ways. One, I can shoot with quite a narrow aperture. By narrowing the aperture down, that allows me to be able to get more of the heather in focus, in relative focus. And so you can appreciate the individual flowers, because they're absolutely tiny, of the heather, and you can capture those within your image. And when a grouse sits in a position where it's surrounded by the blossoming heather, I'll often go for the narrower aperture. Now to do that, I'm going to slow my shutter speed down. Now I'm photographing static subjects. When they take flight, they're going to fly away from you. So you're only going to get the backsides of them. They're not going to fly towards you. You're not going to get those beautiful in-flight shots. So I can afford to have relatively slow shutter speeds because I don't need to be freezing action. And so I can slow that down. At times, I'm hand-holding a 400mm lens. I've got no tripod with me or monopod with me. I probably should have, particularly for the videoing, but I just like to be quite light and nimble as I'm moving around. So for that aspect, I'm shooting at about probably around 500th of a second as the floor mark, and then keeping an eye on my ISO because that's set to auto. I'll adjust my shutter speed so that I'm not going through the bottom of the ISO, so that the lowest ISO it drops to on the Z9 is 64. So I'm just making sure that the light that's available isn't overexposing the image. So I'll increase my shutter speed at times that I need to keep that ISO nice and low, and I'll reduce my shutter speed as the light dictates to again keep that ISO nice and low. Then the other aspect that I'm going for when I'm photographing the grouse is to try and make sure that we've got the colours. So rather than the flowers as a kind of secondary subject, I want the colours to really kind of be the supporting act and show off that grouse in its best light, in its best environment. So to do that, I'm shooting wide open. I'm all the way down at f2.8. So because I've been really close to these grouse, really the eye is going to be the only thing that's sharp. Everything else is going to come soft to almost pure bokeh. So we're going to get these beautiful colours either in the background, and as I mentioned previously, I'm shooting through heather quite often, so we've got some really nice colours as a foreground interest, and I'm utilising that to try and frame the grouse. Now that's really, really important, because what I might have to do is move left or right to ensure that I've not got anything obstructing the eye. I can have, you know, a sprig of heather going across the beak or the neck of the grouse, but I don't want anything going over the eye of the grouse. That's got to be sharp. So I'm just adjusting to make sure that that's the case. And that's really how I'm using my settings today. You know, there's nothing elaborate there. There's nothing quite unique. I'm just utilising those depending on what kind of photograph I'm looking for. Is the heather the supporting act, and that is the flower, or is it the colours that I'm using to frame the subject, and then adjusting my aperture to be able to capture that in the way that I want it to capture. So there you have it, grouse shooting without any harm whatsoever. What a wonderful evening and morning I've had on the Yorkshire Dales, photographing this absolutely exquisite bird. Oh, what is that? Apologies for that, another raptor just caught my eye. It flew right over the top of me, and by the time I put my DJI down and got the camera out, it was quite a range. Oh, there's a second one. There's two now. I think I'm gonna have to that one's getting quite close. There's a male and female kestrel. I thought it was a kestrel. I knew it wasn't big enough to be a buzzard, or the kites that I'd seen previously. It was quite small. I wasn't sure that we didn't have a hobby, but it was a kestrel, male and female kestrel, and they're circling. They're obviously looking for their breakfast too. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed what has been an absolutely wonderful morning, and last night was just absolutely blew my mind. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. Shame I didn't vlog it really. And if I was to give you a piece of advice, I would say evenings are definitely superior to mornings. As I've said previously, I don't know whether that's because the shoots tend to take place in the morning, they're more nervous, but last night they weren't bothered by me in the slightest. I could get incredibly close to them. Yet today, they've kept the distance. I've had to use the thermal scope to be able to spot them and then work my way to get close to them. I've still got some great shots though. Still had some lovely encounters with grouse amongst the heather in a very different light than I had last night. I would encourage everybody to get out and get in the moorland and try and photograph amongst the heather, because it is such a beautiful backdrop. It's been absolutely wonderful to be able to photograph amongst it. They're, as you can probably hear, alive with insects. I've seen so many different bees and flies and butterflies amongst the heather that it's absolutely alive with insects, which is so nice to see, as particularly as we know, insect life across the UK is declining at an alarming rate. But here, they're literally everywhere. And so it's been wonderful to see that. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you're not yet subscribed, consider doing that too. Costs absolutely nothing and it does wonders for my channel. You want to show that little bit of extra support, we've got to buy me a coffee. Link will be at the bottom. And a massive thank you to all those people that take the time to go on there and purchase a coffee. I really do appreciate it, and it does support trips such as this one. We've got Kenya rapidly approaching now. I can't wait to bring you the vlogs from Kenya. That's going to be fantastic. It's completely sold out now. I have, however, got some more trips in the pipeline. Romania to photograph brown bears. That's coming in May of next year. We've got lynx in Spain. That's coming in August. I'm going to give you more details for those trips, and I hope that you could join us. So from the wonderful, beautiful, exquisite Yorkshire Dales, until next time, ta-ra.